Soon they were brought inside the cave. The domain where the Cedos lived was underwater, so it was hard to enter without any help from the Cedos, since in order to breathe underwater, a special plant was needed to be eaten. A handful of the plant, if eaten, could let non-Cedos breathe in the water for a day and protect their skin from the waters. After he ate the plant, he was waiting for Ignia to do the same, but the older teen shrugged and leaned towards the cave walls with no signs of eating the plant. It was just then that he realized that she had no intention of joining him in the Cedos domain. He pleaded with his friends, but she explained that they might accept him inside, but they definitely won't do the same with her. She also reasoned that feather and water don't mix and that he'll be fine as long as he tells the elder all about what she had told him. William was scared and sad to part from his friend to enter an unknown domain, but Ignia had promised him that the Cedos were really loving towards children, so he would be fine. He then reluctantly followed the 3 Cedos under the water while looking back at Ignia's figure that was still leaning on the cold gray walls of the cave. While swimming in the azure lagoon with the 3 Cedos helping him, he observed the underwater community. He was absolutely stunned by how beautiful the domain was. It was like a simpler and smaller version of the world-renowned Atlantis that he had heard in legends of his realm. The architecture is intensely symmetrical with a beautiful, holy geometry. There is a critical integration of water within the architectural setting. Different buildings made from corals and stones were built in different heights. A place that looked like the main plaza was located in the heart of the city, and there was a big statue of a Cedos with a spear in hand. The whole domain was like a jewel encased in a palm made from corals bursting with colors and shapes. The Cedos with mint-colored fins told him that they were headed to the temple where the priests and elders lived. The trip took a couple of hours, and before even 10 minutes had passed, he already wasn't able to swim anymore, so he was left with no choice but to be held in the arms of the tallest Zora and carried towards the temple. He was completely ashamed of being treated like a child despite being 14, but looking at the pleased expression of the Cedos holding him, he was probably a baby in their standards considering his height. When William arrived at the temple, he was again amazed by the domain's structure. The temple was made from white and pearly stones. He observed the graceful, curvilinear stonework, the open-air pavilions with the stones itself casting light. The whole domain was lit up brightly by the glowing orbs that were connected to the buildings, along with some stones that also glowed in luminous colors. He was led inside and placed in a wide hall that was held together by tall, spiraling columns of carved white stones. There he was made to wait for the appearance of the chief and the elder seer. William waited nervously for the presence of the 2 important figures of the Azure Lagoon. But thankfully, or maybe not, the 2 Cedos arrived soon after. The chief has the same body structure as the previous Cedos he had met, but was much larger, taller, and colorful. The long tail fin in his head resembled a shark, and the Cedo scale was colored bright red. His fins were the colors of yellow and green. He wore more silver armor on his body than the Cedos before, and along with the silver armory were delicate gold crafts that were embedded with jewels. Silk the color of vivid cerulean and lilac hang from his shoulders towards his waist. He looked much more at the role of a highly valued leader than the Sephiroth chief. Although he knew not to tell that in front of Ignia, the man was her father after all. The elder seer, on the other hand, looked like an old being that has seen most of what the world could offer. He didn't know much about Cedo biology, but he was pretty sure the old Cedo was female. Unlike the chief whose tail fin resembled a shark, the elder seer looked more like a grouper, with her rounded tail and spiny dorsal fin. She was also the color of cedar with spots of white. She didn't wear any silver armory but opted for a large robe made from white silk. The elder seer named Zula carried an air of wisdom and kindness on her. Cloudy olive eyes watched under him with an equally curious expression as he. I have received the vision of a dark future where the eldritch of the abyss rises and swallows the hollow woods with fury and misery in its soul. But with you, your presence changes that. Oh, young child from the other realm, what secrets do you hold for the eldritch to ache for you as it does? You might not know, and neither do I, but what I perceive is that things will be as it is when you find your way back. No need to tell me what you have experienced, for I know, same with the eldritch. But I'm afraid he knows much more than I ever will. Now come sit here, child. Let me tell you how you can find your way back. William then proceeded to listen as Zula enlightened him on how he would be able to go back to his realm. He was shocked to know that the elder Cedo was a real seer that could see to the future. But she corrected him and said that she could only perceive small pieces of what the future holds, and that only happens when important events will occur. The chief of the Cedos also quietly listened to the elder seer with respect in his eyes towards the older Cedo. It was clear that Zula was greatly respected by the Cedos. It was then revealed to William, much to his dismay, that the portal that could send him back to his realm was located in the heart of the abyss. He could barely manage to hold back his dismay and fear that he would never be able to return home. William doesn't know what the creature he now knows as the Eldritch wanted with him. But it couldn't be good for him. But thankfully the elder seer had given him a rainbow moonstone pendant that she said could ward off the negative effects of the abyss temporarily. She said that when he wears it, then it could only protect him for a single moon cycle, which means a single day. He was already very grateful for the information given by the elder seer, but the gift of the pendant almost brought him into tears. William finally had hope in returning home, and he wasn't going to lose it. After the meeting with the elder, he was given a place to stay and rations for his travels. The Cedos urged him to stay for a night's rest, but he insisted on going now because Ignia was waiting for him outside. The Cedos understood his worries and led him back to the entrance of the Azure Lagoon. When he finally got out of the water, he was excited to tell Ignia about the portal and the pendant when he noticed that she wasn't there. He walked outside of the cave towards the shores of the lagoon where he saw Ignia's properties were. The pots were already placed above unlit coals and the ingredients for the soup ready to be cooked, but she wasn't there. But what he did see was a cluster of familiar brown feathers drenched in blood on the ground, and the sight of the former green forest gone, replaced with the dead monstrosity of a forest. The abyss had spread and Eldritch had taken its revenge. Chapter 12. Let darkness swallow him whole. Grief is like a bottomless void. You can only watch as you fall down deeper into its darkness and turn numb if you don't seek help. Elders of the Hollow Woods, are you sure you want to be my friend? Kid, you already are my friend. You were the one who called me over first. Huh? When? Duh. When you fell at one of the hunter's traps. That was when we first met? You said that I'm your first friend, right? Then I'm gonna make sure that I'm the greatest friend you've ever had when you finally get more. Why are you so confident that I'll make more? Nobody at school like me. Nonsense, you're a good kid, William. Just a little shy, but nothing we can't fix about that. But when I do get home, I'll never see you again. Oh, hush now, don't cry on me, kid. Even if we don't see each other again, what matters is that we have the memories we shared with each other. I'm not the sentimental type, but I'll be on if that's what you need. Now wipe your tears and help me out on the soup, okay? Yes, thank you, Ignia. You're welcome, kid. He could feel his warm tears flow down on his face as he ran through the forest floor, the salty taste heavy on his tongue. But none of that mattered. He didn't even know what mattered now. He continued to run to show his frustration and grief. He ran through the evergreen trees that he grew familiar with due to his journey. He ran through the tall blades of grass under his foot. He ran with nothing on him but the bag that was given to him by the Cedos and Ignia's own bloodied cloth bag. The whole time he had closed his eyes shut, and it was a miracle that he still hadn't hit something or tripped. He closed his eyes as he wanted to not see any more of this cruel place. To not see any more familiar scenes that reminded him of what he had lost. Of who died because of him. Ignia would have been safe and happy if she had never found him. If she had never tried to help him, then she wouldn't have followed him in this damn journey. If she didn't save him from the Eldritch, then that monster wouldn't have hurt her. Now she was missing and possibly dead, all because of him. The Hollow Woods had given him his first friend, and now it had taken her too. He then opened his eyes to look at the starry sky of the forest. The stars seemed to have gone darker, and the sapphire moon dimmed into a pale glow. Right now, what ruled in the sky was the blood-red moon. He glared at the sky and cursed this realm to hell and back. William was just a boy that turned 14 a few months ago. Right now he was lost in another realm with an eldritch abomination after him, and his only friend, the one he had used as his pillar to avoid collapsing from the stress of being away from home, was most likely dead because of him. The boy had never felt emotion this strong in his entire life. It was suffocating and very painful. He wasn't just crying, His cries were the kind of sobbing that came from a person who was drained of all hope. The heaviness of his chest made breathing painful, and a raw, choked sob left his mouth. He was done, he was tired. William wanted to be away from all of this, from the mourning, from the crushed hopes, from the haunting memories, and from the pain. He didn't know when he had stopped running, and he didn't care. Now he was just walking aimlessly in the forest that had brought him so much grief. Chapter 10. Waiting. Cultures and traditions could be categorized into two ideas. They're either important knowledge given by our ancestors or peer pressure from dead men. It just depends on your perspective. A rebellious Cetos fingerling from the Azure Lagoon, it took them about another 3 days to reach the Azure Lagoon. The whole travel there, they were completely on guard and ready to run or fly in case that creature appears again. But thankfully it didn't, and the whole journey there was relatively safe. William again saw many wonderful things, but he wasn't in the mood to appreciate them since he was too nervous and scared of the possibility of that creature emerging again to drag him off to its domain. These 3 days, the idea of going home seems to have grown bleaker. Because back then, without this abyss mess, they were only half sure that the Cetos seer knew a way to send him back. But now, with the arising of the danger of the hollow woods being overtaken by the abyss, his chances of going home soon was slipping from his hands like sand. When the Cetos find out about the situation, then they would undoubtedly be busy trying to find a solution, and what time would they have left to help out a stranger then? His hopes were crumbling, and only the existence and knowledge that his parents were worried about him made him keep on holding on. Ignia had told him that they were near the end of their 7th-day travel. He was grateful and relieved that the long journey was done. The boy was sure that his feet were already callous and cracked with the long distance he had walked. Ignia led him through an opening in the trees to see a magnificent sight. In front of them was a lagoon with serene waters and an aquamarine color so pure it looked unreal, so crystal clear that you can see the waterbed even in the deepest parts. At the northern side of the circular lagoon was a cave that leads downwards. The tunnel inside was quite large, and William had no trouble imagining a giant enter through the large cave. That's only the entrance of the Azure Lagoon. The real domain is hidden underneath. They're kinda like the Mundus and live under the earth. But before we should enter, I should give you a warning. He looked at her questioningly with caution in his eyes, but seeing Ignia give him an easy smile, he knew he shouldn't worry much. While the Mundus absolutely hate getting out of their domain, the Cetos are kinda the opposite of that, she hinted before walking towards the lagoon and dropping down on one knee. They like going out? He hesitantly guessed before walking towards the lagoon too and sitting on its shores. Nope. The truth is, they actually hate the idea of letting other creatures go inside their domain, she nonchalantly said, as if she didn't imply that they were probably not going to be able to go inside, then calmly scooped up some water on her palm and drank it. What? Then how are we going to do? You're probably an exemption though, considering what you are. The Cetos are extremely protective of their home because of an accident a while back when some Mundus affected by abyss rocks went crazy and almost killed some of their fry. Since then, no other possibly dangerous creatures are allowed inside the lagoon. Not that I blame the thought, my tribe would have probably done the same if someone tried to hurt our hatchlings. She stood up again and flew lightly towards the cave and strongly pounded on the cave walls. She then flew back to him and stood in at the shores. When the stone cave outside is hit strong enough, sound vibrations are directed on the bottom of the tunnel and tells the Cetos that someone's here for a trade. Those fishes might be possessive over their home, but they're actually a pretty friendly bunch as long as you act according to their customs. William carefully listened to Ignia's explanation of the Azure Lagoon and the Cetos. He was glad that he had Ignia to help him out in his journey because he was sure that he wouldn't last a day otherwise. Yes, the Cetos value their customs and traditions, so it's better for me to explain while we wait for them to resurface, she remarked while keeping an eye at the entrance of the cave. First is don't disrespect them and try to cheat them at the trade. No one really does that since the shame of a person is the shame of their tribe, but there's still plenty of faulty feathers out there, so that rule is in place. Although pretty much every tribe has that rule. Second, no one touches them. Cetos consider physical touches to be very intimate, so no touchies. Third, no dirtying their waters. They hate getting their waters dirted, so if anybody dives in the water, they better have bathed earlier. Blood is also very much not allowed in the waters. Cetos are omnivores and eat fishes, so blood in the water awakens their hunting instincts. Wait, they eat fish? Isn't that kinda like cannibalism? William had heard of the topic of creatures eating their own kind back at his science class. Their teacher had explained the black widow spiders and praying mantises as examples. What's cannibalism? Ignia just looked at him surprised and completely clueless as to even how to pronounce the word. Looks like the table had turned, William happily thought to himself, remembering his first meeting with the teen and her correcting him at the name of their kin. Cannibalism is when creatures of the same species eat each other. It's really gross and scary. He watched as Ignia processed what he had said, then the corner of her mouth raised into a mocking smile. You do know that treating cetos as fishes is equivalent to treating us Sephiroths as birds, right? She grinned far too sharply for his liking as her eyes twinkled with amusement. William backed away a bit before clarifying his thoughts. I don't mean to bring up your race in this, Ignia, but aren't cetos bipedal fishes? Ignia looked about ready to start laughing right there, and then as she stifled a burst of laughter that escaped her mouth. She looked like she clearly enjoyed making fun of him. William crossed his arms and glared at the older teen with great annoyance. He disliked being made fun like this, but he saw it happen a lot with his other classmates, so this must be something that was normally done by friends, but he was still embarrassed at being the end of a joke. Yes, you are technically correct, but she dragged her words out to add a sense of suspense, and William was about ready to strangle the information out of her. What do you think a Cetans would look like, William? His face scrunched up in confusion before answering honestly. He didn't know where Ignia was going with this, but he really wanted to know more about the cetos so that he knew what to do to not offend them. After all, he needs their help to get him home. Fishes with legs and arms? William imagined the cetos as fishes about the size of a tuna that somehow has arms and legs with scales. It wasn't a pretty sight, but that was what first entered his mind. He might have imagined a prettier sight of mermaids if they told him that they had fish tails, but according to the chief they were overgrown fishes with arms and legs. Upon hearing his answers, Ignia finally couldn't take it anymore and burst out laughing. She clutched her stomach as she laughed loud enough to scare off the birds that were perched upon the tree not far from them. Father isn't one for descriptions, so I don't blame you for making that conclusion, but damn, you're in for a surprise, she had managed to say in between her laughter. William felt his face heat up at being laughed at, yet as he watched her continue to laugh, he couldn't help but join in as well. What kind of surprise? He had asked after they had their laughing fit and were now calmly sitting on the shores. While waiting for the other's response, he heard sounds emerging from the cave. Loud thumps of footsteps echoed on the cave walls and spread outside. One in the height of 8 feet. Chapter 11. The cetos. Every creature's fates are already written down the moment they are born. But alas, I hoped fate would not be too cruel. Zula, elder seer of the cetos tribe, coming out of the cave were 3 tall humanoid figures that stood tall at the height of 8 meters. They had the form of a well-toned human with tall height, but they also had amphibian-like traits, including fins, webbed feet, and gills on the side of their neck as well as the sides of their chest. The cetos had long tail fins on their head and finned appendages on their arms and legs. They differ in colors, but all were quite amazing to look at. The tallest one had turquoise-colored scales and bright yellow fins. The other 2 had the same color of deep blue scales but with different fins. The one on the right had purple long fins while the other had folded mint-colored fins. The cetos didn't wear clothing since they didn't have any private parts to hide, but they did have plates of silver armor on their shoulders and waist. Beautiful silks hang on their body like decorations on their chest and lower legs. The former image of a tuna on legs with human arms was wiped from his mouth, and he was left gawking at the humanoid creatures. He heard his traitorous friend snickering beside him and clearly enjoying seeing him so surprised. William pulled his sight away from the cetos to elbow Ignia. The girl stopped snickering, but she still hasn't wiped that smug grin on her face. He himself was flush red from remembering how he rudely described the cetos. William saw the cetos that had arrived and looked at them with confusion. It was obvious that they were expecting a group of adults with goods that are ready for trading, not a human kid along with an adolescent Sephiroth. Excuse us, sires, but we're not here for a trade. We're here for some more troubling matters. The name endowed to me by my father, Chief Azal, is Ignia Falco. My companion over here is William Woods, a human who has accidentally come upon our realm. We are here in need of the help of your elder seer, as I predict that his presence must have something to do with the problem currently arising. Ignia bowed slightly in front of the Cedos as a greeting and politely explained their situation. William was surprised that she had said that he might be involved in the spreading of the abyss and that the Cedos knew about the matter. Sensing what he might have been thinking, Ignia pulled him over to hastily whisper in his ear. We need a good reason for them to let you in, especially in these busy times. Plus, I'm pretty sure you do have a connection with the spreading of the abyss, since the darn creature it harbors tried to kidnap you specifically. Now hush. The three Cedos stood still for a while and talked among themselves before coming up to an agreement. The tallest Ceto, the one with turquoise scales, walked towards them and greeted them with a bow. The elder seer Zula has been waiting for your arrival. We shall escort you inside.